The wind scoured her face like dry salt. Snow had fallen 3 nights past, just enough to crust the mud and leave jagged patches across the prairie, but now the sun returned only to mock it white light without heat. Her boots were split at the seams, the left one letting water. She could feel it now, cold around her toes, and every step sank slightly with the weight of children behind her. She walked ahead, not because she wanted to lead, but because there was no one else left to. The boy was 8, near silent from the day he'd seen his father buried, and the girl younger 4, maybe 5. Both rode in the wagon when it could move, but the mule was spent in woodland pull anymore, so now it was only what she could carry and what they could walk. The girl whimpered once. She did not look back. They'd left the river bend after the food ran out. 2 tin cans left. One had swollen in the sun. The other held beans she could barely swallow. But the children had eaten them cold and slow, scraping the bottom with their fingers. That had been 2 nights ago, maybe 3. She had stopped counting. All she knew was this road, or what passed for one, stretched west through dun grass and wind minus whooped sage, dipping down only to rise again, each ridge promising something that never came. The sky was a faded blue, merciless into wide. Her back ached from the pack. One of her husband's old coats, too broad, sleeves rolled, still bore the shape of his shoulders. She wore it now, cinched at the waist with a leather strap. It still smelled of him if she breathed deep. She did not. There was a noise behind her. The wagon creaked. The boy's steps were uneven. She paused only long enough to check the girl, who clung to the side plank with her small hands. "You can ride a little longer," she said, not unkindly. But the girl shook her head, lips pressed tight. There had been no tears, not since the last storm. Only silence, the kind that settles inside a child and does not leave easily. Ahead was a bluff, low and gray with a stand of cottonwoods twisted like old men. She eyed it for shelter. The wind could snap in different directions out here, and come dusk it would turn sharp as a knife. If they could find a cut in the rock, a dip in the land, it might give them something like sleep. She had learned not to hope for more. The sun dipped behind a thin gauze of cloud. A buzzard wheeled overhead. Not close, but not far either. Then she saw him, off the road if it could be called, at some distance north, riding a dun horse slow as if the air itself was thick. He wore a low brimmed hat and oilskin duster, neither clean nor tattered, and though he looked their way he did not wave, did not call out, just steered his horse a little closer, enough to show he'd seeing her, but not so much as to seem eager. She stopped walking, not because of fear. She didn't have fear left. It was something else, a tightening in her chest. She put a hand behind her, gently. The boy stopped beside her, eyes narrowed toward the man. The girl leaned against her skirts. The rider dismounted when he was still a dozen paces off, hand loose on the reins. His face was wind-burnt, beard patchy and weeks grown, the look of someone who'd been riding long on Deeding Little. He didn't speak right away. The quiet stretched between them. His horse blinked slow. "You headed anywhere in particular?" he said. His voice was calm, warm, no sharper than the wind. She looked at him a long time before answering. "No." He glanced at the wagon, the mule, the girl, the boy. "Storm's gonna roll down from the north tonight," he said. "You're ain't near through if you stay out in it." She said nothing. He studied her, not in the way a man studies a woman, but in the way someone gauges weight, damage, worth. "I ain't offering shelter," he added, "but there's a sod house back about 5 miles. Mine. You can walk on or turn back. It's your say." The children waited for her to speak. She didn't, not right away. Wind rose behind her, pushing her skirts against her legs, and the girl leaned again into her coat. She looked at the man's face once more. Look, not kind, but not cruel either. He turned, mounted, and waited without looking back. She stepped forward. "Don't let the fire of this story fade. Subscribe and keep it burning." The sod house came into view just past dusk, low to the ground and half minus claimed by the hill behind it. From a distance it looked more like a part of the earth than a place meant to live in. Smoke slipped from a short pipe, pale and thin against the evening dark. The man dismounted first, silent, and laid his horse to a lean -2. She waited while he untied a burlap sack from the saddle and slung it over his shoulder. No words passed. The boy had fallen asleep on the wagon bench, chin against his chest, but he roused as they stopped. The girl stirred too, though she said nothing, only blinked at the shadowed house and clutched her mother's hand harder. The wind cut at their backs now, stronger than before, and she knew they would not have lasted the night out there. Still, she hesitated. "I said it wasn't much," the man offered, "but it holds a fire." He opened the door. The hinges creaked. She ducked inside. The air smelled of wood smoke, dry grass, and faintly of old meat. It was warmer than outside, though not by much. Inside, the walls were baked earth. Dark was set near the low-beam ceiling. A stove sat in one corner with its door cracked, showing coals still glowing. There was one cot, a rough table with 2 stools, a rusted wash basin, a small shelf of tin plates and cups. He tossed the burlap sack down on the table, unrolled it. A handful of potatoes, some jerky, hardened duck, a coffee tin half-minus full. The girl stood close beside her, tugging at her skirts. She took off the coat and knelt, checking the child's hands, her cheeks. Cold, but not blue. The boy came in behind them, quiet as ever. "You'll take the horse out back," the man said. "You can get warm. Water pumps on the south side. Don't draw it fast or it'll clog." He stepped out, leaving the door open. Wind pushed in again before the boy closed it. She crouched by the stove and held her fingers near the iron. They ached with the sudden heat. Her knuckles were cracked, red with cold. She did not look at the cot. The girl curled on the dirt floor beside the stove without complaint. The boy sat on one of the stools and watched her, but still said nothing. He hadn't spoken more than 3 words since the river. She wondered if that would ever change. By the time the man returned, the sky outside had turned black, and the wind carried snow like ash. He stamped his boots and hung his coat on a nail near the door. Without speaking, he moved to the stove, opened it, added kindling. The light flickered, stretched shadows up the earthen walls. "You can take the bed," he said. "I don't use it much." She didn't answer. The girl was already asleep, her knees drawn up tight under her skirts. The boy's eyes were closed, but his hands were still gripping the stool, knuckles white. The man sat on the floor near the door, not quite facing them, not quite turning away. He pulled out a knife and began to clean his nails with the tip. "Not fez, just something to pass the time." After a while he said, "My wife died 3 years back. Pugs. Buried her and my boy the same week." The wind howled outside. A branch scraped the sod roof like claws. "Daughter made it. Just down river with kin. Didn't want to come back with me." He didn't look up, just kept on with the knife. She didn't speak. He didn't ask her story. The silence between them didn't feel cruel, just hard. Like the land, like winter, like whatever was left when everything else got stripped away. Eventually she laid the girl on the cot and pulled a blanket over her. The boy had slid down to the floor, curled into himself, and was breathing slow. She sank down near the stove, her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. The man stood, stoked the fire once more, then lay his coat beneath him on the floor by the door. He didn't say good night. She didn't either. But when the wind moaned long and low outside, and the girl whimpered once in her sleep, he said softly, without turning his head, "I built this place with 2 hands and a busted shoulder. It'll hold through the night." She said nothing, but for the first time in days, she closed her eyes. Morning came grand then. The stove had burned down to its last ember, but the cold hadn't yet seeped through the thick walls. She woke with a stiff neck and a sharp pain in her hip from sleeping against packed earth. The girl still slept on the cot, one hand resting open on the blanket. The boy had moved sometime in the night and now lay beside the stove, arms tucked under his head. The man was already outside. She heard the rhythmic creak of the pump handle, the faint groan of a horse shifting in its stall. She rose, careful not to wake the girl, and stepped out. Snow had settled light during the night, dusting the sparse grass and collecting in the dips between wheel ruts. The sky held a flatness that meant more was coming. She pulled the coat tight around her and walked toward the pump. He didn't speak when she came near, only nodded once and kept working the handle. The water ran slow, thick as syrup but clean. "I boiled some yesterday," he said, motioning toward a tin bucket by the door. "Still good." She nodded. Her mouth was dry, her stomach cramped from emptiness, but she didn't ask for food. He didn't offer it yet. They stood in silence for a while, breath rising between them like smoke. "There's a fence line east needs mending," he said at last, "if the weather holds." She glanced at him, unsure whether it was an invitation or just a statement. "It'll help," she said. His jaw moved slightly as if he expected something else, then gave a short nod. "Children can stay here." "Fire who?" "Mule might not." She glanced back at the wagon. The mule stood crooked and slow, blinking under the lean -2. It hadn't eaten in days. There was nothing left to pull. "We won't be going far," she said, more to herself than to him. He handed her a pair of gloves from his coat pocket, worn leather, too big for her hands, and started off toward the east pasture. She followed. The fence ran in a broken line along a shallow rise, where brittle posts leaned like old teeth. Some wire had slackened, some posts rotted at the base. He knelt at the first break and began tying new line from a coil slung across his back. She stood for a moment, then bent to lift a fallen post. The weight surprised her, not the heaviness of it, but the weakness in her arms. She hadn't realized how little was left in her until she had to lift something other than a child. He watched but didn't interfere. That was something. By midday they set 6 posts and pulled wire tight across 20 yards. The wind picked up again, whistling low through the brush. Her hands bled in places where the gloves hadn't protected her. She wiped them on her skirt without thinking. "You'll need to eat," he said. She looked at him. "I've gone longer." He stood and stretched his back with a quiet grunt. "There's more work if you want it. Enough to trade for food, if not to stay." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted to the edge of the rise where the land fell away into open nothing. Somewhere out there was the river bend and the grave. She thought of the wooden cross, knocked sideways by wind, of the ground not packed firm enough to last. "You want names?" she asked. He shook his head. "No." They worked the rest of the day without speaking more than a few words. The rhythm was something she remembered from before sickness, before the long hunger, before everything hollowed out. Work that didn't ask anything except that you keep at it. The only kind that made sense anymore. When the lights started to go, he handed her a piece of jerky from his coat pocket. She took it without thanks and chewed slow. Her jaw ached. The salt burned her cracked lips, but the weight of it in her stomach was almost comfort. That night, she didn't sleep near the door. She laid the children side by side on the cotton set beside them, back against the wall. He took the floor again. No coat this time. Just lay down slow and closed his eyes. The wind was quieter. Still no good nights. But in the silence, something had shifted. Not trust. Not ease. Just the fact of shared labor and the absence of harm. She thought of the mule, likely dead by morning. She thought of her husband's hands, which had never learned fence wire. She thought of the girl's face, soft in sleep. And without planning to, she whispered more to herself than to anyone. "We haven't stopped walking." The man did not open his eyes. "But after a long time," he answered. "Then stop here." Snow held through morning. Not deep, just enough to make the ground meaner. The boy went out first. She let him. He was old enough to carry wood, to check the lean -2, to feel the wind on his face and know what it meant. She watched from the doorway. His shoulders were narrow, but he moved steady, like his father had taught him. Not fast, not slow, just without complaint. The man was already at the far end of the pasture, pulling deadfall from the fence line. He moved like someone who didn't think about cold anymore. She pulled the coat tighter and stepped out. She didn't look at the mule. Inside, the girl had stirred but hadn't spoken. Her thumb curled near her mouth but didn't reach it. She was too old for that now, too changed. The silence between them all had become something she no longer noticed. That day passed in the same shape as the last. She walked behind him, measured posts, held wire taut while he nailed it. At one point, the wind knocked her off balance and she caught herself on her knee. He didn't say anything, didn't offer a hand. But later, as they moved toward a break in the fence, he handed her a rag for her cracked hands. She didn't say thank you, but she used it. By dusk, the sun bled through the clouds low and orange, casting the prairie in a false swarm. A coyote barked once in the distance, sharp and hollow. The girl was waiting outside the sod house, bare feet in the snow. She was holding something. The man paused. The woman crouched. It was a scrap of muslin, one of the girl's dresses torn near the hem. She had been trying to stitch it back with a pine needle and coarse thread she had pulled from the wagon tarp. Her fingers were red with cold, but the needle was still threaded. She didn't ask, the woman said. The man looked at the girl, then at the scrap. She doesn't have to. They went inside. That night she cooked. Not much. Potatoes boiled in the coffee tin with some bone broth he'd saved in a jar. It smelled like salt and smoke and something older. Something she remembered from before the river. The boy didn't speak, but he ate. The girl too. The man waited, then served himself last. The silence now was easier. Not soft, not warm, but shared. When the fire died low, the man reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a deck of cards. The edges were worn, faces rubbed almost blank. He laid them on the table and began to shuffle, slow and careless. "You play?" he asked the boy. The boy looked at his mother. She gave a small nod. The man dealt 3 cards. One for himself, one for the boy, one for the empty place across the table. He tapped his card. High card wins. The boy turned his card, Queen of Clubs. The man had a 6. The boy didn't smile, but he sat straighter. They played for rounds before the boy's eyes grew heavy. After the children slept, the woman sat at the table and picked up the worn deck. She thumbed through the cards, not looking at the faces, just the feel of them. Familiar, human. He poured a little coffee from what was left and passed it across. She drank. "You came a long way," he said after a while. She nodded. "Long enough." He didn't ask what she was running from. By now it didn't matter. She studied his face in the low firelight. Scar beneath his eye. Hands like old rope. No softness in him, not on the surface. But he hadn't asked her name. Hadn't asked what she wanted. And still H.E.D. built the fire. Let them stay. "Fence'll hold through spring," he said. She nodded again. "What comes after?" she asked. He looked toward the door, toward the prairie hidden in darkness. "Don't know. Might be the same. Might not." She sat back in the chair. The cards rested in her hands like something old and warm, but not yet useless. For the first time since the river, she didn't feel like leaving. The days followed in pieces, quiet and work-minus bound. Snow came again, but light, thin as sifted flour. She rose each morning before the children stirred, stoked the fire, and pulled water from the pump. He was always outside before her, even in the dark, already moving. A rhythm set in not comfort, but pattern. And pattern was enough. The girl began helping too. Small things. Gathering kindly. Scrubbing tin plates in melted snow. Once she mended a tear in the man's shirt, unasked. He said nothing when he found it laid across the table, the seam closed in crooked stitches, but wore it the next day. The boy watched the man now. Not obviously. Just enough to know when he saddled the horse how he coiled the lasso, how he packed his gear. Noticed the way the man marked a trail by sight alone. One night after supper, the boy asked, quiet, whether the fence needed walking again. The man nodded, handed him the oil lamp, and followed without a word. They walked the eastern edge under a sharp moon. When they came back, the boy's cheeks were red with cold, but his hands were steady. The woman didn't ask what they'd talked about, if anything. Some things passed through silence better than speech. It was the 3rd week when the man cleared space in the small shed near the lean -2. Moved his tech, his tools. Shored up the door. "There's room enough to sleep," he said. "If you'd rather." She looked at him. "That where you want us?" "No," he said. "It's where I can't see the cot every time I close the stove." She stared at him a long while, then nodded. They moved the children that night. The floor was hard but dry. She lined it with canvas, stuffed old cloth in the cracks between planks. The wind didn't reach as deep there. That first night in the shed, she lay between them, listening to their breath. The boy had begun speaking again, not much, and never first, but enough to answer when spoken to. The girl had found an old comb near the hearth and spent hours entangling her hair. These were not the things that made her believe in staying, but they mattered. Later, lying awake, She thought of the man, thought of how he moved through each day as if waiting for nothing, how he never asked for more than what someone gave, how he noticed the little things but didn't speak on them, how he watched the land like it owed him nothing. That was what made her trust him. Toward the end of that week, he rode out before sunup, said only that a neighbor needed help with the down steer. She had never seen another person since they'd arrived, had half believed no one else lived within 20 miles. He left the rifle in the lean -2. She spent the day mending what she could, boiling what was left of the meat, washing the children's clothes, and snowmobile. When the girl asked if they were staying, she didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Well, see." He returned near dusk, a long gash down his left arm, bandaged in burlap. She didn't ask how it happened. He didn't offer. But she took the water bucket and poured it for him, took the rag from his hand when he fumbled with it, cleaned the wound. "Hurts?" she asked. He shrugged. She finished strapping the arm tight, but not too tight. "You didn't have to come back." He didn't look at her. "Yes, I did," he said. She sat across from him by the stove, the girl curled up with her head in her lap, the boy near the fire polishing a horseshoe he'd found behind the shed. The snow began again, soundless against the roof. She reached for the coffee tin and poured 2 cups. This time she passed his first. If you believe every ending holds a beginning, subscribe. By early March, the ground softened just enough to hold a footprint. The snow melted in long veins, leaving behind dark ribbons of earth and a wet smell that clung to everything. The sod walls wept at the base. Water pooled beneath the wagon, now half swallowed in mud. She thought often of burning it, but it stood like a marker, so she let it rot. The days stretched longer. He worked the fence, cleared brush, checked the stream south of the rise. The boy followed him more often now, not underfoot but not dismissed either. He learned how to carry a bucket without spilling, how to pick out dry wood, how to listen for ice beneath shallow water. The girl had taken to drawing in the dust with a stick, long quiet lines that she would rub out with her foot the moment anyone came near. She spoke more, but only to her mother, and once, softly, to the man. "Your horse has a white eye." He looked at the girl for a moment, then nodded. "Doesn't spook, though." She had nodded back, solemn as scripture. The woman mended what she could, planted onion ends in a cracked pot near the window. She cooked with less now, measured tighter, stretched meals with boiled grain and wild greens that grew bitter near the edge of the shed. There were days they had only coffee and old bread. She never asked him why he didn't leave them more, why he stayed close. Maybe because he didn't ask her why she hadn't moved on. One morning she found him outside with his shirt off, a bucket of cold water beside him, cleaning the wound on his arm. The cut had healed into a thin pink ridge, but the skin around it stayed raised. She saw how lean he was under the dirt and callous. Nothing wasted. Everything held tight like rope pulled too long. He looked up but didn't move to cover himself. "You been shot before?" she asked. He nodded once. She waited. "Twice," he said. "Other side." He pulled the shirt over his head, slow with the stiff arm. She didn't ask the rest, whether he'd killed a man, whether he'd been running from law or land or something heavier. Whatever had passed through him, it had left its mark. That afternoon they broke open a stump together. The boy watched while the two of them worked with the iron wedge and mallet. She took turns with the sledge, hands blistered again, arms sore from the swing. But when it split, the sound cracked like thunder, and for the first time in weeks she smiled without meaning to. The man saw it, said nothing, but that night when she went to the stove for more wood, she found the wedge already wiped clean, lean sharp side down beside the hearth. The wind came up again after dark, warm and unsettled. A storm building somewhere out past the flats. She stood outside the shed for a while, coat pulled around her, watching the sky go black. The girl was already asleep. The boy lay staring at the ceiling. The man came up from the lean -2 empty pail swinging loose in his good hand. "Storm might bring water," he said. "Or wind," she answered. He stopped near her, close but not touching. "Or both." She looked toward the horizon, nothing there but dark. "I keep thinking I should go." He didn't answer. I don't know what I'm waiting for. Still no answer. Just the wind, and the mules breathing, and somewhere in the distance a low crack of thunder. She turned her face slightly, just enough to see him. "You want us gone?" "No." Silence passed like a slow breath. "You want us to stay?" He shifted his weight, looked out toward the hills. "I want what's true." She stared at him, and for once he met her eyes. "What's true?" she said. She didn't know what that meant yet, but she was beginning to want to find out. The storm came in the night, sudden and full. Wind like a fist through the cottonwoods. Rain sharp as nails on the sod roof. The girl clung to her mother without crying. The boy lay rigid beside them, eyes wide open in the dark. She rose and opened the shed door just enough to see across the yard. The sod house stood against the wind like a warm down tooth. Nothing moving inside, but she knew he was awake. He would have put a basin under the leak near the stove, banked the coals, maybe laid his coat over the hearth bricks to dry. The girl whispered, "Will it come in?" "No," the woman said. "We packed the wall last week." "But if it does?" She pulled her closer. "Then we go through it." Morning left the ground soaked and thick. Water pooled where the fence line dipped. A low part of the field had turned to soft clay. They walked it together, the man, the boy, and her, checking posts for slackened breaks. The girl stayed behind, tasked with boiling water, something she took seriously now. They worked until their boots sank past the ankle. The man said little, the boy less, but the work felt clean. The air smelled of grass and wet stone. Near midday, the man paused at a post half-minus fallen, gestured with the head of his hammer. "You were ready to go yesterday." She wiped her hands on her skirt. "I still might." "You should, if that's what you want." "It isn't." He nodded once and began setting the post. She held it straight, watched the line of his jaw as he worked, how he set each nail with 2 careful hits, never rushing. "What are we doing here?" she asked. He drove the last nail and stepped back, keeping the wind out. She squinted into the distance. The land looked wider after rain, like it had opened its ribs and exhaled. He said, "I don't know how to offer a thing I don't own." She looked at him. "Do you want us here?" "I want you to want to stay." "That's not the same." She nodded. It was the clearest thing anyone had said to her in months. That night, she made flatbread from what little flour they had left, mixed with lard and drain water, cooked over the skillet till it blistered. The children ate fast, like they still didn't trust it would be there tomorrow. She did too. Afterward, they sat by the stove. No cards, no talking, just warmth and wouldn't a low pop of sap inside the logs. The boy laid the cleaned horseshoe on the shelf, flat and center. The girl brought out the muslin scraps she'd been stitching for days. A crude figure had formed to stick legs, a body, and attempted hair. It looked nothing like a doll, but it had shape. It had eyes made from coal ash and thread. She handed it to the man without looking up. He took it in both hands, turned it over once, then placed it carefully on the cot beside the fire. No one spoke. Later, after the children had gone to the shed, she lingered by the stove, hands open toward the heat. He stood beside her, arms folded. "I don't pray," she said. He nodded. "Neither do I. I used to think someone was coming, after, to help. No one is." She turned toward him, but someone stayed. He didn't move. She let the words settle in the quiet. Felt their way. Felt her own. "I won't ask again," she said. "I know." She stepped back away from the stove toward the door. "You said this place holds 3 storms." "It has." She looked at him. Then, "It'll stay until it doesn't." He didn't reach for her, didn't smile, but his eyes softened in a way that felt older than anything she'd ever known. "All right," he said. In April the mule died, quiet without fuss. They found it lying in the thawed mud behind the shed, legs curled, eyes open. The boy stood beside it, staring, long hands in his coat pockets. She watched from a distance, then walked to him. "You want to help bury it?" she asked. He nodded, didn't speak. They used the long spade and the dull shovel. The man dug most of it, but the boy stayed, breaking clods with a smaller blade, pressing his weight into each strike. When it was done, they dragged a tarp over the body, rolled it in, pulled rope. The ground gave easy now that the frost had gone, and the grave filled fast. When it was done, she laid a flat stone at the head, said nothing, The man wiped his brow with his sleeve and looked toward the sky. Gonna be a dry summer, he said. She said, then we plant tight. He nodded. That was the plan. They tilled the southern plot a week later. He had an old plow rigged to a brace and dragged it himself with a harness roped across his chest. She walked behind, breaking clumps, sowing seed when the rows held shape. The boy helped. The girl bought water and kept the fire going. Every few hours she had come to the edge of the field with a tin cup for each of them, silent and proud. At night they ached. The girl slept with her mouth open, limbs loose in the cot like she trusted it now. The boy leaned against the doorframe before sleep, watching the sky like he was listening to it. The man still said little, but his movements changed. Slower at the end of the day. He started leaving the saddle unstrapped, forgot to coil his rope tight, left the gate and latched once, then cursed himself for it. She saw it, didn't speak on it, just fixed what needed fixing. One night, she found him outside near the grave, not the mule's, the other, the one he'd made before her, before the boy and girl. She hadn't asked where it was until now. She had seen the wooden marker, low to the ground, nearly worn blank by rain. He didn't turn when she stepped up beside him. They planted beans, he said, before she took sick. She never saw them grow. The wind moved slow through the grass. I tried after. Didn't take. She nodded. Maybe this time, he said. Maybe. He didn't offer a story. She didn't need one. The grave said enough. So did his hands tucked into fists. Unmoving. They stood there a while, two shadows under a silver moon. Silence between them, full but not empty. Later, back inside, he took the cot for the first time since she'd come. Set the girl gently on a folded blanket near the stove. She didn't wake. The boy curled near the hearth. She lay on the floor without a word. When the fire died down, he sat up, pulled off his coat, laid it over her legs. Spring's here, he said. She looked up at him. So it is. He sat beside the stove, elbows on his knees, eyes on the last coal fading in the grate. It's work now, not just survival. She turned her face toward the ceiling. Good, she said. I know how to work. He looked at her then, not just a glance, but full. I know. That night, for the first time, they all slept in the same room without waiting for silence to settle them. The beans came up in mid-May. Not many and not fast, but enough to mean something. Green shoots pushing through the dry crust of soil, bending toward a sky that gave no guarantees. She knelt by the first row and pressed her fingers to the dirt, not to work it, just to feel the life underneath. A boy brought a pail of water from the pump, held it steady as she poured it slow at the base of each stem. They worked like that all morning. No one spoke. He rode out once a week now to the settlement half a day west, trading labor for salt, flour, sometimes nails or cloth. He never stayed overnight. Returned with the same calm he left with. Never explained who he spoke to, and she never asked. When he came back that last time, he carried something wrapped in canvas, set it on the table without a word. Inside was a pair of worn children's boots, cleaned and minus soled. Smaller ones for the girl, and a sturdier pair for the boy, each set tied with twine. The boy touched them first, didn't try them on, just held them. The girl pressed her thumb to the heel. They're only breaking in, he said. The woman looked at him. We've had worse to break. He almost smiled. The weather turned dry and windless. The air smelled of dust and hot iron. She mended shirts outside in the evenings while the children picked wild onion and dug for grubs in the soft spots along the creek. Sometimes the man sat with her. Sometimes he didn't. One night, she laid a folded cloth on the table beside the lamp, her husband's coat, stitched tight where the seams had split. She hadn't worn it in a month. Too warm now, too heavy. But it held a shape that was hers. The man looked at it. She said, "You can use it if you want." He didn't touch it, just nodded once. Later, after the children slept, she stood in the doorway watching heat lightning roll across the far horizon. The air was still, not a sound from the shed. The moon gave no light, but she didn't need it to know he'd come up behind her. He stood close, not touching. I had a choice, she said, her voice low. He waited. After he died, I could have gone back east. My sister Ro offered a place, said it'd need to remarry, but shed help. She meant well. He stayed quiet. I looked at the wagon, the road, the children, and I didn't go. Why? She took a long breath. Because I'd rather be poor with something honest than safe with someone I didn't choose. He nodded. The quiet between them held. You think you chose this? He asked. She looked up at him. I do now. He didn't speak again that night, but when she went to the shed he followed, laid his coat by the door, sat with his back against the wall while she pulled the blanket over the girl. The boy had already turned away, pretending to sleep, but she saw his eyes were open. The man didn't move closer, didn't ask anything more. But when she lay down, she did not face the wall. She faced the room, and him. In June, a rider came. Midday, with heat rising in waves off the dry grass and the sound of hooves too clean to be stray. The man saw him first, standing at the edge of the south field, squinting into the shimmer where the trail met the flat. The woman came to the door, wiping her hands on her skirt, the children behind her in the shadow of the shed. The rider slowed as he neared older. Dust minus covered, leaned with a coat to find for what. He dismounted without greeting. His horse, a big gelding with saddle polish and fresh shoes, stood easy. The man didn't speak, just waited. The rider looked at the woman. You're Sarah Lorne. She nodded. Widow of Elias Lord. She nodded again, slower. The rider pulled a letter from inside his coat, held it out but didn't let go when she reached. His brother passed in March. Left land east of Wichita. Small house stock. No claim on it but you and the children. The paper crinkled in her hand. She didn't open it. The man beside her didn't move. You'll need to travel by July, the writer said. County assigning deeds by season's end. If you go, it's yours. If not, it folds back to the bank. She looked at the paper, then passed it to the fence line, the shed, the beans just starting to vine. The writer said, Wichita Green. Good land. She said, so is this. Doesn't look it. She didn't answer, just held the paper and nodded once, polite and firm. The rider mounted again, rangeless. He didn't offer anything more, just turned and rode out. The dust slowed to settle. She stayed at the door a long time. The man said nothing. The boy had stepped forward, silent, eyes on her face. The girl clung to her skirt. That night, she didn't speak, left the letter and opened on the table. The children ate quiet. The man sat with his usual stillness, as if nothing had changed. Later, after the fire had burned low and the children slept, she opened it, wrote nothing, just folded it back, smoothed the creases and set it in the hearth. The paper caught fast, turned black in an instant, curled like dry bark. She said without looking up, you ever think of leaving? He shook his head. Thought about not being here, but not about where else. She nodded. Land out there might be better, she said. Maybe, but it's not earned. He looked at her then. And this is. She glanced toward the window where the fence stood straight and the beans were climbing. Yes, she stood. I could leave, she said. Could start over with clean soil. Take their name with me. Pretend the past ended kindly. He didn't speak. She turned back to him. But then he'd never know what came of this place. The man stood too. Not close, but steady. You think it'll be enough? I think if I work it, it will be. He watched her a moment longer, then said, quiet, like a vow, all right. They said no more. The fire went out. The wind blew in soft from the east. And she knew. They were done walking.